My name is Rosalind, and I'm 68 years old. I never thought a pair of earrings could reveal how much my granddaughter truly despised me. When you've lived as long as I have, you start to see value in things most people overlook. To me, beauty was never found in money or newness, it was in the stories objects carried. My earrings, the ones I wore almost every day, weren't just jewelry, they were memories. Gold circles, modest and warm, given to me by my late husband Martin, on our wedding day. I used to joke that those earrings had seen more of my life than anyone else ever would. And it was true. When my granddaughter Sophia moved in with me last spring, I thought the house would finally feel alive again. She was 25, smart, ambitious, and full of that restless energy only youth has. I imagined we'd spend evenings cooking together, maybe watching old movies or sharing family stories over tea. I was so eager for companionship that I ignored the faint warning in her voice when she called me cute for still living in my old Victorian house. The first morning she arrived, she looked around with that curious mix of fascination and judgment only young people seem to have. "Wow, Grandma," she said, her tone half amused, half critical. "You really live like time stopped in the 70s. I smiled, choosing to take it as a compliment. "It's all memories, sweetheart. Everything here tells a story." Her gaze landed on my earrings. I caught her staring, and for a moment, I thought she admired them. Instead, she wrinkled her nose. "You still wear those? They look ancient. Why not get something stylish for once?" I laughed softly. "They were a gift from your grandfather, Sophia. They're special to me." She shrugged, clearly unimpressed. "They're just gold hoops, Grandma. They don't even sparkle." Her words stung, but I brushed them off. I'd been through worse than careless remarks. Still, I found myself touching the earrings, absent-mindedly that evening, wondering when people stopped seeing value in meaning. As weeks passed, her comments didn't stop, they grew sharper. She'd make fun of my clothes, my furniture, even my handwriting on grocery lists. "You really don't believe in updating anything, do you?" she'd say with a laugh. At first I smiled through it, convincing myself she didn't mean any harm. But there was something cruel in her eyes when she spoke, something cold. I'd raised her mother, Helen, to be thoughtful, but Helen had always been drawn to status, to shine. Perhaps Sophia inherited that same hunger for appearance over depth. One afternoon, we sat together in the living room. The sun filtered through lace curtains, glinting off my earrings. Sophia leaned back on the couch, scrolling on her phone, and suddenly she said, "You know, Grandma, if you ever decide to stop wearing those, I could make them look modern. Maybe redesign them into something fashionable." I looked at her, searching for warmth in her tone, but all I saw was calculation. "Redesign them?" I repeated softly. She smirked. "Yeah. I mean, they'd look way better on me anyway." That made me pause. Not because of the insult, but because of the entitlement in her voice. It wasn't a joke. She truly believed those earrings, those memories would one day belong to her by default. I smiled politely, hiding the ache beneath it. "These earrings don't need redesigning, Sophia. They've seen enough life to be perfect as they are." She rolled her eyes, mumbling, "Whatever you say, Grandma." Later that evening, I stood before the mirror, looking at myself. The woman who stared back had wrinkles around her eyes and soft gray in her hair, but her earrings still shone, catching the light like they always had. They didn't make me look glamorous, they made me feel whole. I remembered Martin slipping them into my hand on our wedding morning, whispering, "Wear these, Rosie." So, no matter what happens, a part of me stays close. That promise still hummed inside me like a secret melody. Every time I touched them, I could almost hear his laugh again, smell the faint hint of his cologne. Those earrings were the last tangible piece of the life we built together. And now, they'd become the target of my granddaughter's sneer. That night, I sat in my room long after Sophia went to bed. The house was quiet, except for the faint ticking of the clock in the hallway. I took the earrings off, held them in my palm, and studied them under the soft glow of the lamp. Their gold wasn't bright anymore, it had softened over time. Like me, but it still carried warmth. I wondered if Sophia would ever understand. To her, they were just accessories, small, outdated circles of metal. But to me, they were vows. They had seen my youth, my motherhood, my widowhood. They had been there when I buried Martin, when I held my newborn daughter, when I taught my first class, when I grew old alone. When Sophia mocked them, she wasn't mocking jewelry, she was mocking my entire history. Still, I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe she was just young, insensitive, lost in a world that values shine over soul. I told myself she'd grow out of it, that she'd learn the same way we all do through time and loss. But something about the way she looked at those earrings stayed with me. Her eyes didn't hold admiration or amusement. They held something else, something greedy, something quietly possessive. I didn't know it then, but that glint in her eyes would soon become the spark that set everything on fire. But what she didn't know was that those earrings were never meant for her. Those earrings weren't jewelry to me, they were promises turned into gold. Every time I touched them, I felt Martin's presence. I could still remember the exact moment he gave them to me. It was our wedding morning. I was a nervous 20-year-old bride, my hands shaking as I tried to fasten my veil. Martin walked into the room, ignoring the old superstition that the groom shouldn't see the bride before the ceremony. He smiled at me with that calm, certain smile that always steadied my heart. He held out a small velvet box. Inside were those gold earrings, simple, elegant, but breathtaking in their quiet beauty. "Rosie," he said softly, "these belonged to my mother before she passed. She told me that the woman I marry should wear them not for their beauty, but for their strength. She said gold doesn't rust, and neither should love." That day, I promised myself I would never let those earrings leave me, and for 50 years, they didn't. Every anniversary, I wore them. Every family photo, every holiday, every heartbreak, they were there. Even the day Martin took his last breath, he touched one earring gently and smiled. "Still shining," he said weakly. "Just like you." Now, decades later, my granddaughter, his own flesh and blood, looked at them as if they were worthless. The irony stung like salt on an old wound. I often wondered if maybe I'd failed to teach the next generations what those earrings meant. My daughter, Helen, never cared for sentimentality. From the moment she could make her own choices, she chased everything shiny and new. Designer handbags, diamond necklaces, the kind of luxury Martin and I could never afford and never desired. When Helen was younger, I tried to give her one of my mother's brooches, something passed down for generations. She accepted it politely, wore it once, and then I saw it listed online a week later. That was Helen, always moving forward, always leaving meaning behind. I thought maybe Sophia would be different. I wanted to believe she'd inherited her grandfather's depth, not her mother's hunger. But from the moment she first sneered at my earrings, I started to doubt it. One afternoon, as she lounged on the couch scrolling through her phone, I decided to tell her their story. Maybe, I thought, if she knew their history, she'd see them differently. I sat beside her and said, "Sophia, do you know where these earrings came from?" She barely looked up. "You said Grandpa gave them to you, right?" "Yes," I said patiently. "But they were his mother's before that. They've been passed through 4 generations of women in this family. They're older than both of us combined." She frowned. "So they're like family heirlooms or something?" "Exactly. They're meant to remind us of where we come from. Every woman who's worn them has done so with love, respect, and strength." She let out a small laugh, not cruel but careless. "That's cute, Grandma. But honestly, they'd look way better with a different setting. Maybe add some diamonds, make them more current. You could sell them for a lot if you upgraded the design." "Sell them?" I repeated, stunned. "Yeah," she said, shrugging. "You'd get more out of them that way." I studied her face, searching for any sign of understanding, but there was none. She wasn't thinking about legacy or sentiment, just value, money, possession. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in bed holding those earrings, running my fingers over their smooth edges. I thought about my mother, my grandmother, and all the women who wore them before me. They didn't wear them for show, they wore them for remembrance. Each of us had faced loss, heartbreak, endurance. And through it all, the earrings remained. I thought about how Helen once told me, "Mom, you can't live in the past forever." Maybe she was right, but I couldn't see the past as a cage. To me, it was a foundation. Without it, who were we? Sophia's dismissive words replayed in my head. They'd look way better on me. There was something about her tone, light, but sharp enough to cut, that stayed with me. I realized then that she didn't just want the earrings. She felt entitled to them. She saw them not as symbols of love, but as trophies waiting to be claimed. The next morning, I caught her staring at them again as I made breakfast. She smiled when our eyes met, but it wasn't a sweet smile, it was sly, knowing. Those must be worth a lot, huh, Grandma? She asked casually. I set down the spatula. They're worth everything, but not for the reason you think. She tilted her head. You should get them appraised. I mean, it'd be good to know their real value. I forced a small smile. Their real value can't be measured, Sophia. She smirked and went back to scrolling. I could feel her curiosity tightening like a noose. Later, I called Harriet. My voice shook slightly as I spoke. I think Sophia wants the earrings, I said. Harriet sighed. Of course she does. Pretty things attract greedy eyes, dear. But don't worry. They're yours. She can't take what isn't given. I wished I believed her. Because deep down, I saw it clearly now. Sophia's interest wasn't innocent. The sneers, the jokes, the questions about their worth, it was all leading somewhere. Something in her tone, in her stare, in her laughter, it told me I was no longer looking at a girl teasing her grandmother. I was looking at a woman scheming. And for the first time, I realized she wasn't mocking them, she was plotting something. I started to see my own home change, as if her arrogance poisoned the air. It's strange how quickly the atmosphere of a house can shift. One day, Sophia's laughter seemed to fill the rooms, and the next, every sound she made felt like a reminder of disrespect. My home, my sanctuary, no longer felt like mine. She moved through it as if she were the owner, rearranging things, leaving clutter, and rolling her eyes at every small tradition I'd kept alive. At first, it was subtle. She started replacing my framed family photos with her own selfies. Then, she moved my antique vase from the mantel to the floor because, as she put it, old stuff doesn't vibe with my aesthetic. I said nothing. I'd learned that arguing with the young about sentiment was like talking to a storm. You just had to wait until it passed. But Sophia wasn't a passing storm. She was a slow-moving one, settling in to destroy everything in her path. She began bringing friends over without asking. Loud, perfumed young women with glossy hair and voices that carried through every corner of my home. They'd sit in my living room, drinking wine, scrolling through their phones, talking about fashion and followers and money. I stayed mostly in the kitchen, listening quietly. One day, I heard my name in their conversation. Your grandma's house is cute, in that retro museum kind of way, one of the girls said with a giggle. Sophia laughed. Yeah, it's like living in a time capsule. I swear she's still emotionally in 1975. They all laughed, and I froze behind the wall, a dish towel in my hand. She's sweet, though, another girl added quickly, maybe sensing the cruelty in Sophia's tone. Oh, totally, Sophia replied, smirking. Just stuck. She still writes grocery lists on paper and listens to old jazz. It's kind of sad. I stood there quietly, staring at the wooden floorboards I'd polished for decades, feeling something crack inside me. I wasn't sad, I was sentimental. There's a difference. But to them, that difference didn't exist. After they left, Sophia found me in the kitchen. You know, Grandma, you don't have to hover when I have guests. It's a little awkward. I forced a smile. I wasn't hovering, dear. I live here. She rolled her eyes, muttered something under her breath, and disappeared upstairs. I heard her laughter again a few minutes later, muffled through her door. I told myself to let it go. But Harriet's voice echoed in my mind from our last conversation. Some people, Rosalind, confuse kindness for weakness. I was beginning to see what she meant. A week later, I found Sophia standing in my bedroom. My heart jumped. No one went in there except me. She was standing in front of my mirror, wearing one of my scarves, twisting her hair and pouting at her reflection. On the dresser beside her sat my jewelry box, half open. What are you doing? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She turned, startled, then smiled innocently. Relax, Grandma. I was just trying on some of your stuff. You've got great taste, honestly. I don't get why you never wear most of it. My gaze went straight to the box. The earrings were still there. Thank heavens. That's because most of it isn't meant to be worn casually, I said carefully. And this, I motioned toward the box, is private. Her expression hardened slightly. Private? We're family. What's the big deal? I took a slow breath, choosing my words wisely. Family doesn't mean entitlement, Sophia. Some things are sacred. She laughed softly. Sacred? Grandma, they're earrings, not relics. Actually, I said, meeting her gaze, they are relics of love, not greed. Her smile faltered, but only for a moment. Then she shrugged. You're so dramatic sometimes. When she left, I locked the jewelry box for the first time in years. My hands trembled as I slid the key into my pocket. I'd never thought I'd need to protect myself from family. That evening, Harriet came over for tea. She noticed my tight expression immediately. She's getting worse, isn't she? I nodded. She's not just disrespectful, Harriet. There's something colder underneath, like she wants to take, not share. Harriet sighed and stirred her tea slowly. You've got to stop treating her like a child, Rosalind. She's a grown woman now. If she's crossing boundaries, it's because she knows you'll forgive her. I'm her grandmother, I said softly. Forgiving her feels like instinct. And yet, Harriet said gently, some instincts can destroy you. That night, I lay awake listening to the soft hum of the house. I thought about how Martin used to fill this space with music and laughter. How our daughter had once played in the hallway, drawing pictures on the floor with chalk. How I'd cooked every family meal in that kitchen with love. It had always been a home filled with warmth, but now, with Sophia in it, the warmth had turned to unease. I rose quietly and checked the jewelry box again, just to be sure. The earrings gleamed faintly in the dim light, still nestled in their velvet cushion. Relief washed over me, but only briefly, because deep down, I knew that wouldn't be the last time I'd have to check. When I turned to leave the room, I noticed something on my dresser, a faint smudge of lipstick that wasn't mine, near where the box had been. I touched it lightly, feeling a chill crawl up my spine. Sophia had been closer to them than I realized. And when she'd looked at me earlier, there'd been something in her eyes I couldn't name. Not love, not curiosity. Something sharper, possessive. Her eyes flashed with something dangerous when I said that. I woke up one morning, and the earrings were gone. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Usually, I could hear Sophia moving around upstairs, her music, her footsteps, her voice echoing through the old hallways as she talked on the phone. But that morning, nothing. Just the distant tick of the kitchen clock and the creak of the wooden beams. The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful, it feels wrong. My morning routine was the same as always. I made tea, checked the mail, fed the cat. When I went back to my room to get dressed, something felt off immediately. The air was still, but there was a tension to it, a heaviness that made my chest tighten. I looked toward my dresser and froze. The jewelry box was slightly ajar. At first, I thought maybe I'd forgotten to lock it. My memory wasn't what it used to be, after all. My hand shook as I opened the lid. Empty. The space where the gold earrings should have been gleaming was now hollow. Only the velvet impression of their shape remained. I stared for a long moment, my heartbeat roaring in my ears. I checked every drawer, every corner, even though I already knew the truth. They weren't misplaced. They were gone. My throat went dry as I whispered her name. Sophia. I searched the house, my panic growing with each step. Her bedroom door was half open. Inside, her clothes were strewn everywhere, makeup scattered across the vanity, half a dozen empty coffee cups on the desk. But she wasn't there. I checked the bathroom, the laundry room, even the garden. Nothing. Then, just as I turned back toward my room, I heard the front door open. She walked in, sunglasses perched on her head, a shopping bag in her hand, humming to herself like she hadn't a care in the world. There you are, I said, my voice trembling. She jumped slightly, surprised to see me standing there. Oh, hey, Grandma. You scared me. I took a slow step toward her. Where were you? Out, she said casually. Why? My eyes burned as I asked, did you take my earrings? Her smile faltered for a second, then returned too smooth, too rehearsed. What? No. Why would I do that? The jewelry box was open. They're missing. She raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. Maybe you misplaced them. You said yourself your memory isn't great lately. The words hit like ice. She'd used my own vulnerability as a weapon. They were in the box last night, I said firmly. Now they're gone. You were the only one home. Sophia sighed, shifting her weight. Grandma, I swear I didn't touch them. Maybe you dropped them somewhere. I stared at her, face so calm, so unconcerned, and I knew she was lying. I could see it in the way her eyes darted slightly to the side, how her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her shirt. She wasn't going to admit it. Not yet. That evening, I called Harriet. My voice cracked as I explained what had happened. She took them, Harriet. I know she did. There was a pause on the other end. Then Harriet said, if she did, She'll show them off. Vanity always wants an audience, Rosalind. Her words stuck in my mind for the next few days. And sure enough, Harriet was right. 3 days later, while scrolling through social media, I found it. A photo of Sophia, my granddaughter, standing in front of a mirror, her lips painted crimson, wearing a new dress. And hanging from her ears, catching the light perfectly, were my earrings. My earrings. The caption read, "Vintage luxury, the past reborn for the present." I stared at the image until my hands went numb. The comments flooded beneath it, compliments, heart emojis, praise. "Those are stunning," one read. "You've got such timeless taste," another said. I wanted to scream. Not because of the theft, but because of the audacity. She had taken something sacred and turned it into a fashion statement. When she came home that night, I was waiting for her. She walked in humming, still wearing them, as if nothing had happened. I stood in the doorway of the living room. "Take them off," I said. She froze. "What?" "The earrings. Take them off." Her smirk returned, though her eyes flickered nervously. "Oh, Grandma, don't start again. They look better on me anyway." "Those are not yours," I said, my voice rising. "You stole them from me." "Stole?" She laughed. "I borrowed them. You're overreacting." I took a step closer. "You had no right." She shrugged. "You never wear them out. What's the point of having something beautiful if it just sits in a box?" "They're not for show," I said sharply. "They're for remembrance." Her expression darkened. "Then maybe it's time to remember the world's moved on, Grandma." Her words cut deep, sharper than any blade. She turned and walked away, the golden hoops swaying mockingly with every step. I stood there, trembling not from fear, but from fury. She had crossed a line she could never uncross. I went to my bedroom that night, sat at my dresser, and stared at the empty jewelry box. The house was quiet again, suffocatingly quiet. In that silence, I made myself a promise. I would not beg for respect. I would teach it. I placed the empty box back in the drawer, turned the key, and whispered to myself, "You'll learn, Sophia. You'll learn what those earrings truly mean." And as she turned away, I knew this wasn't about jewelry, it was about respect. I asked her to return them, but her laughter cut sharper than any blade. The next morning, I waited for her in the kitchen. The teapot hissed softly on the stove, and sunlight filtered through the curtains, cutting neat lines across the table. I'd barely slept, my mind replaying every cruel word she'd said. I didn't want to yell. I didn't want a scene. I just wanted her to give them back and, maybe, remember who she was raised to be. When she finally came downstairs, she looked as though she hadn't a care in the world. Her hair curled, perfume heavy, wearing the same earrings that had haunted my dreams all night. "Good morning, Grandma," she said lightly, pouring herself coffee like nothing had happened. I kept my eyes on her. "Sophia," I said evenly, "we need to talk." She sighed, setting her cup down. "If this is about the earrings again, can we not?" "It is," I said quietly. "I want them back." She leaned against the counter, smirking. "You're really still on this?" "Grandma, I told you I just borrowed them." "Borrowing implies permission," I replied. "You didn't ask." She rolled her eyes. "I didn't think you'd care. You never wear them out anymore. They deserve to be seen." "They were seen," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "By the people who mattered, by your grandfather, by your mother when she was little. They've lived more life than you've even begun to understand." She let out a sarcastic laugh. "Oh, please. You act like they're some sacred artifact. They're just earrings. They're mine now." I blinked. "Yours?" She nodded, crossing her arms. "You're old, Grandma. Eventually all of this will come to me anyway. I'm just getting a head start." Her words hung in the air like poison. For a long time I didn't speak. I just looked at her, this girl I'd held as a baby, whose skinned knees I'd kissed, whose bedtime stories I'd told, and wondered where I'd gone wrong. "Finally," I said, "you've mistaken inheritance for entitlement. They are not the same thing." She rolled her eyes again, muttering, "You sound like a teacher." "I was a teacher," I said sharply. "And I thought I taught you better." She tilted her head, smirking again. "Guess that's your mistake then." Something in me broke. I stood, slowly, deliberately. "Sophia, take them off right now." Her smile faltered. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," I said, pointing at the earrings. "Take them off and hand them to me." She laughed again, but it sounded nervous this time. Wow. You're really serious about this. Huh? I'm serious about respect, I said. Respect? She repeated mockingly. You're the one acting insane over jewelry. You should be thanking me for giving them life again. They already had life, I whispered. You just can't see it. For a moment, the air between us felt electric, like the house itself was holding its breath. She stared at me, defiant. Then, slowly, she reached up and touched one of the earrings, letting it dangle between her fingers. You really want these back, Grandma? She said softly. Yes, I said. She smirked, her eyes gleaming. Then come and get them. Before I could speak, she turned and walked out of the kitchen, her heels clicking on the tile. The sound echoed like a taunt. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. I wanted to chase after her, but I knew it wouldn't matter. She didn't respect me. She didn't fear me. She didn't love me enough to stop herself. That night, Harriet came by, sensing something was wrong before I even opened the door. You look pale, she said, setting down her purse. She won't give them back, I said, my voice flat. She laughed at me. Harriet's lips pressed into a thin line. Then it's time to stop asking. What do you mean? You've spent your whole life teaching through kindness, she said. But sometimes, Rosalind, kindness has to take a different form. You can't make her love you, but you can make her understand what she's lost. Her words echoed through me like a sermon. I realized she was right. Sophia didn't respond to warmth, she responded to consequence. I don't want to be cruel, I whispered. You're not being cruel, Harriet said softly. You're protecting what's yours. There's a difference. That night, I sat at my desk and pulled out my old stationery, the same kind I used when Martin was alive. My hand trembled slightly as I began to write. Not a letter, but a list. Steps, plans, decisions. Harriet's words replayed in my mind. When I finished, I folded the paper neatly and placed it inside a drawer. My reflection in the window stared back at me, tired. Yes, but resolute. The next morning, I went to the study where my will was kept. It had been years since I last looked at it. I opened the envelope, reading through the faded ink. My estate, my savings, my possessions, it was all going to Sophia. At the time, that had seemed natural. She was family, my only grandchild. Who else would I leave it to? But now, that thought felt like an open wound. She hadn't earned it. She didn't cherish it. She didn't even want it. She wanted what she thought it represented. Control, vanity, power. I picked up a pen and stared at the document for a long time. My fingers shook as I whispered to the empty room, not anymore. The decision came as easily as breathing. When Harriet visited that afternoon, she found me smiling faintly over my tea. What are you thinking about? She asked. I'm thinking, I said slowly, that some lessons have to be written, not spoken. Harriet smiled knowingly. Then write it, my dear. Write it in ink so it can't be erased. I nodded, and that night, I did exactly that. And that's when Harriet's plan began forming in my mind. Harriet always said patience could break people faster than anger ever could. The morning after that final argument, I woke up with a strange calm inside me. Not peace exactly, but something like it, a quiet certainty. I'd spent months trying to reason with Sophia, believing if I spoke kindly enough, if I showed enough love, she would remember who she was. But love without respect is like writing on water. It disappears the moment you stop trying to hold it. So I stopped holding. Harriet came over that afternoon, and as we sat at my kitchen table, she leaned in close and whispered, "It's time, Rosalind. You've done all you can. Let's make this official." I nodded. We spoke for hours, crafting a plan that was more about truth than revenge. You're not punishing her, Harriet reminded me. You're protecting the dignity of what's yours. The first step was the lawyer. Mr. Henderson had been our family's attorney for years, a kind man with sharp eyes and a deep sense of fairness. I made an appointment for the next morning. When I arrived, he smiled politely. "Mrs. Langley," he said, "it's been too long. Please, call me Rosalind," I said softly. "I have a matter that needs attention." He motioned for me to sit, and I handed him my old will. "I'd like to make some changes." He read through it quietly, nodding. "And what changes would you like to make?" I took a deep breath. "Everything. I want nothing at all left to my granddaughter, Sophia Langley." He raised an eyebrow. "May I ask why?" I smiled faintly. Because she already took what she thought mattered. Now she'll learn what really did. He didn't press further. Understood, he said simply. For the next hour, we went through every detail. My modest savings, my home, my jewelry, all of it would go to the Langley Women's Shelter Fund, an organization that provided aid to widows and single mothers. It was a cause close to my heart, one Martin would have been proud of. When we reached the line about the earrings, I paused. My hands trembled slightly as I said, I want these listed as permanently withdrawn family property. That means they can't be sold, inherited, or claimed. They're to be preserved under my name, held by the charity for display. Mr. Henderson looked up from his papers. That's an unusual request. I smiled. Those earrings have seen generations of love, betrayal, and endurance. They belong to history now, not greed. He nodded slowly. Then we'll make sure that history stays intact. I signed the papers in 3 places, each stroke deliberate, each letter steady. When I finished, Mr. Henderson placed a hand over the documents and said, This is binding, Mrs. Langley. There will be no confusion later. That's the point, I said. On the drive home, I felt lighter. The late afternoon sun cast golden streaks across the road, and for the first time in months, I wasn't angry. I was ready. Harriet was waiting on my porch when I returned. So? She asked eagerly. It's done, I said. Everything's changed. She smiled proudly. Good. Now you do exactly what I tell you. Act normal. Be kind. Let her think she's already won. I laughed softly. You sound like a general planning a war. In a way, she said, grinning. I am. That night, I put the plan into motion. I invited Sophia to dinner. She seemed surprised but curious. You're not mad anymore? She asked suspiciously. I smiled gently. No, dear. Life's too short for grudges. I just want us to have peace again. She studied me for a long moment, clearly not believing me but unable to resist the olive branch. All right, she said finally. Dinner sounds good. Over roasted chicken and potatoes, I played the part perfectly soft, forgiving, sweet. I asked about her job search, her friends, her plans. She relaxed by dessert, laughing, even touching my hand once as she said, You're not so bad when you're not lecturing me, Grandma. Inside, I wanted to cry. Not from guilt, but from the sadness of knowing that kindness had to become a weapon now. Later that night, I overheard her on the phone, bragging to someone. I think she's finally giving up. She even said she wants me to have more responsibility with the house. I told you she'd come around. Harriet was right, patience broke arrogance faster than anger. The next few days, I let Sophia believe everything was fine. I complimented her clothes, asked her opinions on little things, even made her favorite breakfast. Each time, I saw her guard lower a little more. She thought she'd won. But what she didn't know was that the very foundation of her victory was gone. The house she lived in, the inheritance she counted on, the legacy she thought belonged to her, it was all sealed away. My signature had seen to that. One evening, as she was getting ready to go out, she passed me in the hallway. You look nice, I said softly. She smiled, proud and oblivious. Thanks, Grandma. These earrings really do make me look powerful, don't they? I met her gaze and said, Power looks different depending on who's wearing it. She laughed lightly and left the house, her perfume lingering behind her. When she was gone, I went to my desk, opened the drawer, and tucked away the final copy of my new will. The ink was still drying. I sealed it in an envelope labeled, To be opened after my passing. I sat back, letting the silence of the house wash over me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel helpless. I felt composed, strong. My story was written now not in argument or tears, but in quiet defiance. Because I already knew exactly how she'd destroy herself. She thought she was winning, but every move she made tightened the trap around her. Over the next few weeks, Sophia blossomed into arrogance. The change was slow but unmistakable. She started dressing differently, more expensive, more polished, and her tone shifted too. There was a smugness in her words now, a confidence that made me sick to my stomach. She believed she had me wrapped around her finger. At breakfast one morning, she twirled one of the earrings between her fingers and said, You know, Grandma, I've been thinking. When I get my own place, I'll probably redecorate it with some of your antiques, to keep the family spirit alive. I smiled faintly. That's thoughtful of you, dear. She didn't notice the way my hand tightened around my teacup. Harriet's advice replayed in my mind. Let her believe she's already won. And so I did. I let her brag. I let her strut around the house as if she owned it. I even let her talk about how underappreciated she was for keeping me company in my old age. Every word was another thread in the web she was weaving around herself. But I wasn't the only one listening. Harriet, sharp as ever, started keeping an eye on Sophia whenever she went into town. One afternoon she called me. "You'll never guess who I saw at the cafe today," she said, her tone dripping with both amusement and disgust. I didn't need to guess. "Sophia? Wearing your earrings," Harriet confirmed. Telling her friends they were a gift from her late grandmother. I felt my blood run cold. "What?" "Oh yes," Harriet continued. "She said you were sentimental, that you gave her your favorite jewelry to show you trusted her." They all swooned, of course. Vanity always looks prettier when it's wrapped in lies. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat at my desk for a long time, staring at the blank page in front of me. My will sat beside it, neatly sealed, my handwriting calm and deliberate. For the first time, I felt no sadness, only clarity. Sophia was building her own downfall, one deceit at a time. A few days later, I started writing in a small notebook. I recorded dates, times, and details. Everything she said. Everything she took. Every instance she flaunted what wasn't hers. Harriet helped gather what I couldn't see. Screenshots, posts, photos, proof, not because I wanted to ruin her, but because I wanted her to face the truth without a single shadow of denial. One evening, Sophia came home late, her laughter echoing down the hall. I was waiting in the living room, pretending to read. She looked surprised to see me awake. "Out late again?" I asked mildly. "Yeah," she said, tossing her purse onto the couch. "Had dinner with some friends." I smiled. "You seem to be enjoying yourself lately." She grinned, leaning against the doorway. "Why shouldn't I? Things are finally good. You're calm. I'm happy. We're both getting along." "Yes," I said softly. "We are." She didn't notice the faint tremor in my voice. The following week, her vanity began to overtake her completely. She started leaving her things everywhere, clothes, jewelry, even bills. One morning, I found a receipt from an upscale boutique on the kitchen table. The purchase was significant, nearly a month's worth of my pension. Curious, I looked at the listed item. Gold restoration and cleaning, vintage jewelry. My heart skipped. That afternoon, I watched her come home wearing my earrings, except now. They gleamed brighter, shinier. She'd had them cleaned, possibly even altered slightly. "Do you like them?" she asked, twirling a strand of her hair. "I figured you'd want them to look their best." "You always said they had history." I forced a tight smile. "They certainly do." Inside, I was shaking. How dare she tamper with something so sacred? But Harriet's words came back to me again. "Patience, Rosalind. Patience." And patience rewarded me sooner than I expected. One night, Sophia stumbled home late after another one of her celebratory dinners. She tossed her purse onto the table, the earrings glinting faintly under the dim light. When she went upstairs, she forgot them, left them right there beside her empty wine glass. For a long time, I just stared at them. My pulse thudded in my ears. Every instinct told me to snatch them up and hide them forever. But I hesitated, afraid she'd notice. Then I thought of Martin, his words echoing from so long ago. "Gold doesn't rust, Rosie, but people can." I picked up the earrings, my hands trembling. They were warm, still carrying the faintest scent of her perfume, a sickly sweetness that made me want to cry. Carefully, I cleaned them, dried them, and placed them in a different box, one she'd never find. When I heard her footsteps later that night, I slipped quietly into bed, pretending to sleep. The next morning, her scream shattered the stillness of the house. "Where are they?" she shouted from the living room. I stayed silent for a moment, sipping my tea before calling back. "What's wrong, dear?" She appeared in the doorway, her face pale with fury. "My earrings are gone." I looked at her, with feigned confusion. "Your earrings?" "Yes," she shouted. "The ones I—" She stopped herself mid-sentence, realizing her mistake. "The ones you what, Sophia?" I asked softly. She swallowed hard. "The ones you let me borrow." "Ah," I said, setting my cup down. "You must have misplaced them." Her jaw tightened. "I didn't misplace them. You took them." I raised an eyebrow. "Took your earrings?" She hesitated. "You know what I mean." "No," I said calmly. "I don't think I do." Her lips trembled with rage. She wanted to accuse me outright but knew she couldn't, not without exposing herself. "Check your room," I suggested kindly. "Things have a way of turning up when you least expect it." She glared at me before storming off, slamming doors upstairs like a furious child. I smiled faintly into my tea. The trap had sprung, and she didn't even know it yet. And when she realized they were missing again, the war truly began. Sophia accused me of stealing from her. The irony of it nearly made me laugh. To have my own granddaughter, my blood, look me in the eyes and accuse me of theft was something I never imagined I'd live to see. But that's exactly what happened 3 days after I took back what was mine. It began on a Sunday morning. I was reading quietly in the sitting room, sunlight spilling across the lace curtains, when I heard the sharp, angry sound of footsteps pounding down the stairs. I looked up just as Sophia burst into the room, her face flushed, her hair wild. "You took them!" she shouted. I blinked slowly, closing my book. "Took what, dear?" She stood there, trembling. "Don't play games with me. You know exactly what I'm talking about, the earrings." I tilted my head. "My earrings?" Her jaw tightened. "You said they were mine. You said you didn't care anymore." My heart thudded, though I didn't let it show. "I said I forgave you, Sophia. Not that I gave them away." Her eyes flared with disbelief. "You're unbelievable. You waited until I was asleep and then stole them right out of my room." "I didn't steal them," I said softly. "You can't steal what already belongs to you." She let out a harsh laugh. "Those earrings were mine." I set my book aside carefully and stood, meeting her gaze. "No, Sophia, they were never yours. Not by gift, not by blood, not by right." She stared at me, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Then, with a sneer, she said, "Maybe I should call the police. See how they handle elderly thieves." For a moment I thought she might actually do it. Her hand hovered near her phone, her eyes searching my face for fear. But I wasn't afraid. I'd lived through wars of words, heartbreaks, and funerals. This was just another storm to weather. I smiled faintly. "Call them, if you must. But you should know something, Sophia." She hesitated, her fingers freezing mid-motion. "What?" "Those earrings are insured, registered in my name. Their provenance documented and sealed long before you were even born. So if you tell them I stole them, they'll ask for proof of ownership." Her eyes darted, uncertain now. "You're lying." "I'm not," I said. "Mr. Henderson, my lawyer, has copies of the documentation. He knows where they are, who they belong to, and who's been wearing them without permission." Her lips parted slightly, her confidence faltering. "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm not a fool," I said gently. "You think your generation invented manipulation, but you forget who raised you." She stood there for a long time, her breathing shallow, her face shifting between anger and disbelief. I could almost see her mind racing, calculating how to regain control. But she was trapped. Every lie she'd told, every photo she'd posted, every ounce of vanity had been recorded. Finally, she lowered her voice and said, "You can't keep them forever." "I don't have to," I replied. "Forever doesn't belong to anyone. But respect? That's earned." She looked at me then with something I hadn't seen in her before, not hate, but fear. Maybe not of me, but of the truth she could no longer twist. She turned sharply and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her so hard that one of the picture frames on the wall rattled loose. The house fell quiet again, save for the faint ticking of the clock. Later that evening, Harriet dropped by with a casserole and her usual knowing smile. She could tell by my expression that something had happened. "She confronted you, didn't she?" Harriet asked, setting the dish on the counter. "She did," I said, pouring us tea. "She accused me of stealing," Harriet chuckled dryly. "Well, that's rich. She threatened to call the police," I added. Harriet laughed outright this time. "Let her try. The only thing she'll end up stealing is her own reputation." We sat in silence for a moment, sipping tea. Then Harriet said quietly, "She's unraveling, Rosalind. Her pride's wounded. That kind of pride doesn't heal easily." "I know," I said softly. "But I won't fight her anymore. The truth will do that for me." Harriet reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You've done everything right, my dear. Now let the storm pass." That night I went to bed early, exhausted. But sleep didn't come easily. I kept hearing Sophia's voice, furious, trembling, desperate. Beneath all the anger, there had been something else. something small and scared. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, she would realize what she was doing, that she would come to me the next morning, remorseful, and ask for forgiveness. But the next morning, she didn't come to the kitchen at all. I found her door closed, her music blasting. She was hiding not from me, but from the shame she didn't yet know how to face. I let her be. Silence, I'd learned, was the greatest teacher of all. But even silence has limits. Because arrogance doesn't fade, it festers. And when it festers long enough, it turns to something far darker. But I knew this was far from over. She would come for them again. It happened the night I caught her red-handed. The house was silent except for the faint rustle of leaves against the window pane. I had gone to bed early, but sleep wouldn't come. Something felt wrong again, a familiar unease that crept up my spine and refused to leave. The same feeling I'd had the morning I discovered the earrings missing. I lay there listening. The clock on my nightstand ticked steadily, and for a while, that rhythm lulled me into a half-dream. But then I heard it. A soft creak, then another. Footsteps. Careful, hesitant, but not my own. My breath caught. I sat up slowly, straining my ears. There was movement in the hallway, bare feet on wood, the slow turn of a doorknob. Then, the unmistakable sound of drawers opening. I didn't need to guess where she was. I reached for the lamp and switched it on, the sudden glow cutting through the darkness like a blade. Quietly, I slipped out of bed, my heartbeat quick and steady. I padded to the doorway and stood there for a moment, listening. The sound was coming from my study. When I entered, I saw her Sophia kneeling beside my dresser, one hand inside the drawer that held my new jewelry box. Her body froze when the floor creaked under my step. "Looking for something?" I asked, my voice calm but cold. She gasped and spun around. Her eyes were wide, her face pale in the light. For a moment, she looked like a child caught stealing cookies. Then her expression hardened. I just needed medicine? I finished for her, remembering her last lie. She swallowed hard. I couldn't sleep. I was just checking. Checking what? If I'd hidden them somewhere? Her lips trembled. "You can't keep doing this, Grandma. They're mine. They belong to me." I stepped closer, my gaze unwavering. "No, Sophia. They belong to this family, and that means they were never yours to take." She stood quickly, her breathing ragged. "You're obsessed. You treat those stupid earrings like they're people. Because they meant something," I snapped. "Something your mother never understood, and now you don't either." Her face twisted. "Oh, here we go again. Another lecture about tradition and meaning and whatever sentimental nonsense you live for. Guess what? No one cares about your old memories anymore." The words stung more than I expected. I took a deep breath, forcing my hands to stop trembling. "You know, Sophia," I said quietly, "I used to believe that about you. I thought you didn't care because you were young. But now I see it's not youth, it's greed." She flinched, and for the first time, I saw something flicker behind her defiant shame. But it disappeared quickly, buried under anger. "I'm not greedy," she said. "I just want what's mine." "It's not yours," I shouted, my voice sharper than I intended. "And if you can't see the difference between wanting something and deserving it, then I've failed you." Her eyes glistened with tears, but she refused to look away. "You think you're so noble, don't you? You think you're teaching me a lesson, but all you've ever done is make me feel small, lesser, like I'm not good enough for anything you have." That stopped me. For a heartbeat, I saw not a thief, but a lost girl, a reflection of all the pain she'd buried under arrogance. I softened my tone. "Sophia, that's not what I wanted. I only wanted to show you the value in things that last. Not money, not fame, love, history, meaning." She wiped her eyes roughly, furious at her own tears. "You don't get it. You've had your life, Grandma. You've had love. You've had everything. And what do I have? Nothing but leftovers and old stories." Her words pierced deeper than I wanted to admit. I looked at her, the anger, the pride, the hurt, and saw the cost of a world that had taught her that worth came from possession, not purpose. For a moment, I almost reached for her, almost forgave her again, but then I saw the glint of gold in her palm. She'd already opened the box. My earrings. I froze. "Put them down," I said, my voice trembling. She backed away slightly. "No. I'm done asking. I'm taking them." "Put them down," I shouted, louder this time. For a moment, she looked ready to throw them at me, to end the conversation with violence. Then she seemed to think better of it and stormed toward the door. I stepped in her path. You walk out that door, Sophia, and you'll lose more than just my trust. She stopped, glaring. You don't scare me. I'm not trying to scare you, I said softly. I'm trying to save you from yourself. She shook her head, tears streaming now. You're just trying to control me. I sighed. Control you? No. But I won't let you destroy everything your grandfather and I built. Her face twisted into a grimace. He's gone, Grandma. Let it go. They're just earrings. The words echoed through me like a slap. I stepped aside slowly, my voice suddenly calm again. Go ahead then. Take them. She blinked, uncertain. What? Take them, I repeated. If they mean so little to you and so much to me, then take them and see what they bring you. She hesitated, confusion flickering across her face. But pride won. She clutched the earrings tight and brushed past me, disappearing up the stairs. I stood there long after she was gone, my body trembling with exhaustion. The house felt colder somehow, emptier. I sank into my chair and stared at the quiet hallway, listening to her. Footsteps fade into silence. When morning came, her door was shut. She didn't come down for breakfast. I didn't knock. Some silences don't need breaking. Instead, I sat at my desk and opened the small box where my updated will lay sealed. I smiled faintly, tracing the edges of the envelope. She thought she had taken victory from me that night, but she didn't know her victory was already written out of existence. And the next morning, she found out exactly what that meant. I made sure she was there when my lawyer read my revised will. It wasn't difficult to arrange. I had planned every detail the day I signed those papers with Mr. Henderson. I knew this moment would come the day Sophia would have to confront what she'd done and what she'd lost because of it. 3 weeks had passed since that night. The tension in the house had grown unbearable. We barely spoke. She spent most of her time in her room, sulking and scrolling through her phone, while I moved quietly from room to room, pretending everything was fine. But underneath my calm exterior, something was building, a sense of closure. The quiet satisfaction of knowing the truth was finally about to surface. Mr. Henderson called that morning. "Everything is ready, Mrs. Langley," he said. "Would you like me to read it today?" "Yes," I replied, "and make sure Sophia is present." When I told her, she looked startled. "Why? Are you dying or something?" she said with a nervous laugh. "No," I said simply. "But it's time we talked about the future." "Fine, whatever." Later that afternoon, we arrived at Mr. Henderson's office. The small space smelled of leather and paper, a smell I'd always loved. Harriet came with me for moral support, sitting quietly beside me as Sophia slouched across the desk, her phone in hand. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat and began reading. His voice was steady, professional, but I could sense his disapproval. When he glanced at Sophia, "This is the last will and testament of Rosalind Langley," he read. "I, being of sound mind and body, declare this to be my final and binding document." Sophia smirked. "Final, huh? Guess I'd better pay attention." Mr. Henderson ignored her tone and continued. "To my dear friend and neighbor, Harriet Monroe, I leave my grandmother's sapphire brooch, a symbol of our lifelong friendship and her unwavering loyalty." Harriet smiled faintly and squeezed my hand. "To the Langley Women's Shelter Fund," he continued, "I leave my home, its contents, and the sum of $100,000 to provide safety and hope for women who have lost both." Sophia looked up, her smirk faltering. "Wait, what?" Mr. Henderson kept reading. "To my granddaughter, Sophia Langley." She straightened, her lips curling into a small, expectant smile. "I leave the knowledge that love without respect is hollow, and inheritance without gratitude is a curse." Her smile froze. "What?" she said, her voice sharp now. "Mr. Henderson paused, his eyes flicking toward me before continuing. "In the matter of personal jewelry, including but not limited to the family heirloom gold earrings, I declare them permanently withdrawn from family possession and preserved under the name of the Langley Women's Shelter Fund, to remain as part of a historical display." The room went still. Sophia's face turned red, her jaw tightening. "You can't be serious," she said, looking between us. "You're giving away everything? To strangers?" "They're not strangers," I said quietly. "They're women who know what value really means." "This is insane," she snapped, standing abruptly. "You can't just cut me out like this. I'm your family. Family, I said, meeting her glare, isn't determined by blood. It's determined by how you treat the people who love you. You're doing this to punish me, she shouted. No, I replied calmly. I'm doing this to protect what matters. The difference is important. She turned to Mr. Henderson. You can't let her do this. She's manipulating me. She's confused. Mr. Henderson's face remained neutral. Mrs. Langley was of sound mind when she signed these documents. Everything is legal and binding. Sophia's voice broke. She's my grandmother. She can't just leave me nothing. I took a deep breath, my heart aching at the sight of her angry, trembling, desperate. I left you something, Sophia, I said softly. I left you the truth. She shook her head. You're cruel. No, I said. Cruelty is taking something sacred and mocking it. Cruelty is stealing love and calling it a favor. I'm simply being fair. Her eyes shimmered with tears she refused to let fall. You'll regret this, she whispered. When you're gone, you'll regret pushing me away. I smiled sadly. I already did that once. Not anymore. She grabbed her purse, muttering, I'm done with this, and stormed out of the office, the door slamming behind her. The silence that followed was heavy but strangely peaceful. Harriet reached over and patted my hand gently. You did it, she said. Mr. Henderson looked at me kindly. You did the right thing, Mrs. Langley. Sometimes, love has to take the shape of consequence. I nodded slowly. I know. When we left the office, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in streaks of amber and gold. I felt a strange calm settle over me, as if the house, the earrings, even the memories had finally exhaled. That evening, as I sat by the window sipping tea, I saw Sophia's car pull into the driveway. My chest tightened. She came inside quietly, not saying a word. She stood in the doorway of the living room for a long moment before speaking. You really meant it, she said softly. Yes, I replied. She gave a bitter laugh. You gave everything to strangers. I hope you're proud of yourself. I am, I said. She stared at me for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then she turned and left, slamming the door one final time. I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. I just sat there, listening to the wind through the trees, feeling the weight of generations lift from my shoulders. The earrings were no longer a burden, they were safe now. The story behind them was written in ink, preserved forever, beyond greed or possession. I thought it was over, but fate had one last lesson to deliver. Sophia's pride didn't fade, it shattered. For weeks after the will reading, the house was eerily quiet. Sophia stopped speaking to me altogether. She moved through the halls like a ghost, silent and cold, refusing even to make eye contact. When she did look at me, her expression was one of pure bitterness, as if I had personally stripped her of her worth. I didn't scold her, didn't provoke her. I simply went about my days with a calm heart, watering the garden, reading on the porch, writing letters to Harriet. I'd done what needed to be done. The rest, I knew, was out of my hands. But pride doesn't die quietly. It thrashes, it destroys, and Sophia's vanity was about to eat her alive. It started small little things I noticed when she thought I wasn't looking. Her phone calls became more secretive. She'd whisper in her room for hours, her tone sharp, anxious. Then came the late nights again. I'd hear her slipping out of the house at odd hours, heels clicking down the driveway, the car engine humming into the distance. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. Harriet had eyes everywhere in this small town. One afternoon, Harriet came by, her face pale with a mix of disbelief and concern. Rosalind, she said quietly, you'd better sit down. What is it? I asked, setting down my teacup. Harriet sighed. She's been trying to sell. I blinked. Sell what? The earrings, she said gravely. But not the real ones, fake ones. She's been posting online, saying they're the original heirlooms, your earrings, and asking for thousands. My heart sank. You're certain? I saw the listing myself, Harriet said. She even used an old photo of you wearing them. Said you'd passed them down to her as part of the family estate. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My body felt numb. How far had she fallen? She's digging her own grave, Harriet said gently. You don't need to do anything. And indeed, I didn't. The truth has a way of clawing its way into the light, especially when lies try to smother it. It took less than a week for the storm to break. The auction site she'd used flagged her listing for fraudulent claims of provenance. Someone had reported her, perhaps a buyer who'd tried to verify the authenticity. Within days, her account was suspended, and the story spread quickly through her social circles. People began talking. Whispers first, then laughter, then pity. The granddaughter who had mocked her grandmother's outdated jewelry had been caught trying to sell fakes for cash. When I heard, I didn't feel satisfaction. Just an ache, a deep, quiet ache for what she'd become. A few days later, she came home. I was sitting on the porch, shelling peas as the sun dipped low. Her car screeched into the driveway, and she stepped out, looking disheveled, her makeup smeared, her hair tangled. "Grandma!" she shouted, her voice cracking. I looked up calmly. "Yes, dear?" She marched toward me, eyes burning with a mix of rage and desperation. "You knew this would happen. You wanted this." "I don't know what you mean," I said softly. "They banned my account. My friends think I'm a scammer. Everyone's laughing at me." I sighed. "Sophia, what did you expect would come from lying?" Her jaw trembled. "You could have stopped it. You could have told them the truth, that they were mine." "They weren't," I said simply. Her voice broke. "You've ruined me." I looked at her, really looked at her, this young woman I once adored, standing there trembling, her arrogance stripped away, revealing something fragile underneath. "No, Sophia," I said gently. "You've ruined yourself." Her breath hitched, her anger giving way to something closer to sorrow. "I just wanted something of yours, something real." I put down the bowl of peas and folded my hands. "Then you should have wanted my love. You already had that. You just didn't see it." For the first time, she said nothing. She stood there, trembling, staring down at the porch steps. A long silence stretched between us, heavy with everything that had gone wrong. Finally, she whispered, "I don't even know who I am anymore." "You're still my granddaughter," I said. "That hasn't changed. But maybe it's time you learn who you want to be without taking it from others." Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how." "Then start small," I said softly. "Start by being honest." She shook her head, turning away. "You'll never forgive me." "I already have," I said. "But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting." She hesitated, then walked away slowly, her shoulders slumped. The front door closed behind her, and I knew she wouldn't be back for a long time. When night fell, Harriet came over again. "How did it go?" she asked. "She's broken," I said quietly. Harriet nodded. "Sometimes that's the only way people see themselves clearly." We sat on the porch together, the crickets singing their slow song. I thought about Sophia, about Helen before her, about how greed had carved its way through my family like an old, unhealed wound. But I also thought about how every fall carries within it the seed of redemption. Maybe Sophia's lesson wasn't over yet. Because sometimes, losing everything isn't the end. It's the beginning of understanding. And I knew, deep down, the earrings had done their job. Months later, I realized those earrings had become more than heirlooms. After Sophia left, the house fell into a silence I hadn't heard in years. Not an empty silence, an honest one. The kind that fills a place after chaos has finally taken its leave. I spent my mornings in the garden again, tending to the roses Martin had planted decades ago. Their petals bloomed soft and full, their fragrance sweet enough to remind me that not everything old loses its beauty. For a while, I wondered if Sophia would ever come back. Harriet said she'd seen her around town once or twice, distant, thinner, her laughter gone. "She's working now," Harriet said one afternoon. "At the thrift shop near the post office. Seems quieter. Different. The word lingered in my mind. Maybe the world had started teaching her what I couldn't. The earrings, meanwhile, sat untouched in my desk drawer. I'd wrapped them carefully in a piece of velvet and placed them in a small box with a note, one written not for Sophia, but for whoever came after me. Sometimes I'd open the drawer just to look at them. Not to wear, not to flaunt, just to remember. One evening I fell ill. Nothing too serious at first, just exhaustion, a fever, and the kind of cough that makes your bones ache. Harriet insisted on calling a nurse. "You're not as young as you used to be," she teased, but her eyes were worried. That's how Lily entered my life. She was 27, with gentle eyes and a quiet smile. The kind of woman who spoke softly but made you feel heard. She visited every morning with tea and medicine, checking my vitals and chatting about the little things. Her dog, her favorite books, the flowers she planted at her apartment. Over time, I began to look forward to her visits. There was something about her that reminded me of myself at her age, hopeful, curious, kind. She wasn't rushing through life, she was savoring it. One morning, as she helped me to the porch, she noticed the photo of Martin and me hanging near the door. "You two look so happy," she said warmly. "We were," I said, smiling. "He gave me something once, something that carried our whole story." She tilted her head. "The earrings?" I blinked, surprised. "How did you know?" She smiled shyly. "Harriet told me about them. She said they've been through quite a journey." I laughed softly. "That's one way to put it." Lily hesitated before asking, "Can I see them?" I led her inside, my hand steady on the railing. When I opened the drawer and lifted the small velvet box, she gasped softly. "They're beautiful," she whispered. "But they look lived in." "That's exactly what they are," I said. "Lived in, loved, and a little bruised, like the rest of us." She smiled, touching them lightly, reverently. There was no greed in her eyes, no envy, just appreciation. "They suit you," I said suddenly. Her eyes widened. "Oh no, Mrs. Langley, I didn't say I was giving them," I said, amused. "I said they suit you." We both laughed, and for a moment, the weight of the past few months lifted. But that moment stayed with me. The way she looked at them not as treasure, but as legacy. The quiet respect in her gaze. That's when I knew what I had to do. 2 weeks later, after my health had improved, I called Harriet and asked her to witness something. "I've decided who the earrings belong to," I told her. She smiled knowingly. "Not Sophia, I assume?" "No," I said softly. "Someone who understands their worth." When Lily arrived that afternoon, I asked her to sit. I placed the small velvet box on the table between us. "Mrs. Langley, what's this?" she asked, looking puzzled. I opened it slowly, letting the light catch the gold. "These have been in my family for generations," I said. "They've seen joy, loss, love, and betrayal. They carry the weight of every woman who wore them before me." Her eyes softened. "They're precious." "They are," I said. "And they've already been through enough hands that didn't deserve them. I want to make sure the next ones do." She blinked, realizing what I was saying. "Mrs. Langley, I can't possibly accept." "You can," I interrupted gently. "Because you see them for what they are, not what they're worth." Tears welled in her eyes. "But why me?" "Because kindness deserves inheritance," I said simply. "And because my granddaughter will inherit something better than gold one day." Understanding. For a long time she didn't move. Then, slowly, she reached out and touched the earrings again, as if afraid they'd vanish. "I'll take care of them," she whispered. "I know you will," I said, smiling. "That's why they're yours." When she left that day, she hugged me tightly. I felt her tears on my shoulder, and for the first time in years, I felt peace settle over me like sunlight after a storm. That night, I sat on the porch with Harriet. She poured the tea and said, "Martin would be proud, you know." "I hope so," I said softly. "He always believed things should end where they belong." "Do you think Sophia will ever forgive you?" Harriet asked after a pause. I looked toward the garden, where the roses swayed gently in the wind. "Maybe," I said. "When she learns that forgiveness and inheritance are the same thing, you can't demand either. You earn them." Harriet smiled. "You always did know how to turn a lesson into poetry," I chuckled. "Maybe, but sometimes, poetry's the only way to survive what love leaves behind." As the last light faded, I looked up at the stars, the memory of Martin's voice still echoing in my heart. "Gold doesn't rust," he'd said once. He was right. It doesn't, but it can remember. And in her eyes, I saw what real inheritance looked like. A year later, a letter arrived addressed in shaky handwriting I recognized instantly. I was sitting by the window when the postman slid it through the slot. The envelope was plain, no return address, just my name written in uneven, hesitant strokes. I didn't need a signature to know who it was from. I'd recognize that hand anywhere. It was Sophia's. For a long time, I simply stared at it. My heart was a storm of emotions, curiosity, hesitation, something almost like fear. After everything that had happened, what could she possibly have left to say? Part of me wanted to throw it away, to leave the past buried where it belonged. But another part of me, the part that still loved her, despite it all, needed to know. So, I opened it. The paper was creased, the ink faintly smudged, as though written through tears. I could almost see her sitting at some small table, head bowed, trying to find words that had escaped her for years. Dear Grandma, I don't know if you'll even read this, but I had to write. I've spent the past few months trying to understand what happened between us, and for the first time, I think I finally do. I stopped there, already feeling the lump rise in my throat. You were right. About everything. About respect. About value. About the difference between owning something and deserving it. I used to think you were trying to control me, but I see now you were trying to protect me, from my own pride. The tears came then, quietly, uninvited. After the mess I made, I left town. I needed space to breathe, to start over. I found a small job at a thrift shop. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work. Every day, I see things people throw away, old rings, faded dresses, worn books, and I think of you. You were right, Grandma. Everything has a story, even the broken things. I smiled faintly through my tears. At first, I was angry at you. I thought you betrayed me. But over time, I realized I betrayed myself. I wanted so badly to prove I was worthy of something beautiful that I forgot what beauty even meant. A woman came into the shop the other day wearing gold earrings. Simple, elegant, familiar. For a second, I thought they were yours. She told me they were a gift from a kind older woman she used to care for. She said the woman believed that kindness was a form of inheritance. My hands froze. There was no doubt in my mind who that woman was. Lily. I wanted to ask her name, but I didn't. I just smiled and said they were lovely. And you know what? They were. I don't deserve them, Grandma, and I know they'll never be mine. But seeing them on her, it didn't make me angry. It made me proud. Proud that something of you still shines in the world. The ink grew shaky toward the bottom of the page. I think about you every day. About how patient you were, even when I didn't deserve it. About how you always believed in meaning over money. I get that now. You told me once that love without respect is hollow. I used to roll my eyes at that. But you were right. I chased love that looked shiny. Not love that stayed steady. I'm trying to be better. I've been volunteering at the shelter you donated your house to. Every week, I help sort through donations, make tea for the women there, and sometimes read to their children. It's not much, but it feels like something real. It feels like you're there, guiding me. I wiped my eyes, my breath catching as I read the final lines. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect you to write back. But I want you to know that I understand now. The earrings weren't about gold, they were about grace. They weren't meant for me because I wasn't ready. Maybe one day I will be. Thank you for teaching me, even when I didn't listen. Thank you for loving me, even when I didn't deserve it. If I could go back, I'd never sneer. I'd just say they're beautiful. Because they were. Because you are. With love, Sophia. When I finished reading, the letter trembled in my hands. I pressed it to my chest and let the tears fall freely. Not from pain this time, but from relief because I knew that the woman who had written these words was no longer the same girl who once mocked me. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the small wooden box where I kept my most precious memories. Martin's old watch, a lock of Helen's hair, a dried rose from our garden. And now, Sophia's words joined them. Later that evening, I called Harriet. She wrote to me, I said softly. I knew she would, Harriet replied. She's her grandmother's girl after all. Maybe now, I said, smiling through my tears. Maybe now she's finally learned what inheritance really means. I looked toward the photo of Martin on the wall, his gentle smile frozen in time. She's coming home, I whispered. Not to the house, but to herself. The wind outside rustled through the trees, soft and forgiving. I took it as his answer. For the first time in years, I believed she might truly change. Time moved on, but the story of those earrings refused to fade. The house was quieter than it had been in years. The chaos of Sophia's visits, the sneers, the theft, and the arguments had all passed. In their place was calm, a serene kind of peace I had not felt in decades. The garden thrived under my care, roses in full bloom, their fragrance mingling with the soft scent of old wood and summer air. I found myself thinking often about Lily, the young nurse who had cared for me during my brief illness. Her visits had become a daily joy, filled with conversation, laughter, and quiet understanding. She never rushed, never judged, and never pretended to know the value of things she didn't understand. When I showed her the earrings and shared their story, she handled them with reverence. as though she were touching a piece of history. "That's incredible," she said softly, turning the gold hoops over in her hands. "They've seen so much, haven't they?" "They have," I said, smiling. "And now, they'll see more." A few days later, I decided it was time. I called Lily over and placed the small velvet box in front of her. "These earrings have been through generations," I said. "They carry more than beauty. They carry love, endurance, and lessons that gold alone cannot teach." She looked at me, eyes wide. "I don't know if I deserve them, Mrs. Langley." "They're not for deserving," I said gently. "They're for understanding." She gasped slightly as she opened the box. The earrings gleamed softly in the sunlight, familiar and timeless. She traced her fingers over the delicate gold, her expression a mixture of awe and gratitude. "I'll take care of them," she whispered. "I promise." "I know you will," I said. Later, Harriet came by, peering over my shoulder at the young woman cradling the earrings. "I see why you chose her," she said. "She sees them for what they are, not what they could buy." "Yes," I said. "That's the kind of legacy I wanted. Not vanity, not greed, understanding." Time moved forward. The Daniel Langley Scholarship Fund, which I had created to honor Martin and to support women like Lily and the countless others who needed hope, flourished. Students sent letters, sometimes including drawings or small notes about how their education had changed their lives. The story of the earrings and the lessons they carried became intertwined with the scholarship itself, a quiet legend that reminded everyone who heard it of patience, love, and dignity. Occasionally, I'd hear from Sophia. Her letters were rare but thoughtful, always handwritten, shakier each year but filled with understanding. She described her work at a women's shelter, teaching young girls how to value themselves beyond what they owned. She never asked about the earrings again. Instead, she wrote about her own journey, learning to honor others, respect what they held dear, and measure success not in possession, but in impact. I kept her letters in a small box with mine, Martin's watch, and the dried rose from our garden. They were reminders that lessons, once learned, could reshape a life. The years passed. Lily wore the earrings on special occasions, always handling them as though they were fragile yet unbreakable. She never flaunted them, never boasted of them. They were a quiet statement of continuity, a bridge between the past and the future. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch watching the sun turn the sky golden, I realized that the earrings had outlived anger, greed, and cruelty. They had survived the sneers of a young woman, the trials of generations, and the uncertainty of ownership, and in doing so, they had carried something far more precious: the ability to teach, even after all else had faded. I thought of Sophia one last time. She had finally seen what I had tried to teach her, not through words, not through anger, not even through confiscation, but through consequence and patience. The earrings had been a mirror, reflecting her choices back at her, and ultimately guiding her toward understanding. I closed my eyes and remembered Martin's words, whispered on our wedding day. "Gold doesn't rust, Rosie, and neither does love." Indeed, both had endured. That evening, Harriet stopped by with tea. She sat beside me on the porch swing, her hand brushing mine lightly. "You've done something extraordinary," she said. "Not just with the earrings, but with the people who needed to see them. You've left a mark." I smiled faintly. "A mark, yes, but not mine alone. They've carried themselves, survived themselves, taught themselves. I only guided them." Harriet nodded, understanding perfectly. When night fell, I went inside and glanced one last time at the velvet box on my desk. Lily had left earlier, promising to return for dinner tomorrow. The earrings lay there, catching the soft lamplight. They seemed alive in the quiet, as if aware that their story had finally reached peace. I thought of generations past the women who had worn them before me, and of generations yet to come. They had carried our love, our strength, and our lessons. And now, in new hands, they would continue to do so. Some legacies are loud, some are carved in marble, but the truest ones, I realized, are quiet. They live in hearts, in small acts of understanding, in hands that hold treasure not for wealth, but for meaning. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. I could almost hear Martin's voice, soft and warm, whispering from somewhere beyond. "Well done, Rosie. Well done." The wind rustled the curtains. The stars appeared in the deepening sky, and I felt a calm unlike any I had known in years. The earrings would endure, The lessons would endure, the love would endure. Because true inheritance isn't passed through gold, it's written through redemption.